y'all are getting a indoor video today. It's super windy outside and raining here in Texas. But I want to talk about Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, apparently. Not something that I knew about or something I celebrate. But since it's a topic and it's kind of what I was basing my channel on to begin with, back at the beginning of this year, I was in a pretty bad, just depression, mental state. I didn't really have source of income. The company I owned, and I wasn't really into it. I didn't really want to do that line of work anymore. There was just a lot of things going on. It was wintertime and we were all cooped up in the house and not getting outside, no vitamin D. I wasn't working out, wasn't eating right. There was just a lot of things that were going on, and I was in a pretty low spot, and I decided, to start telling my story about just my life of, drug addiction and all the things that have troubled me over all these years. And hopefully it helped out somebody else out there that might be going through it or has gone through it and just wants to hear other stories. As men, we're not told, but it's just kind of known that we don't really talk about our feelings. We really bottle things up and kind of put on a stoic face and just get, grind it out and just get through it. But, I got some friends that have been going through some things, and I've been trying my best to reach out to them and, talk to them as much as possible and making sure they're okay. One of my buddies who I've mentioned a couple of times, he's been going through a really nasty divorce, and I had lost an uncle to unaliving himself. YouTube will punish me if I say the actual thing. After a really nasty divorce, so now I take that really super serious. And, like I said, he's been going through it and it's been really nasty, and I try to reach out to him as much as possible, every morning. A lot of times we go back and forth on Instagram, sending reels and funny memes and stuff like that. And when I don't hear from him, I'll send him a handful of things. And if he doesn't respond, it worries me. I know it sounds lame to call your buddy and ask him how he's feeling and does he want to talk. And, it's kind of just ingrained in us to be like, you're gay, dude, leave me alone. But I'd rather text him in the morning and say, hey man, how you feeling this morning? And you're gay, dude, leave me alone, rather than not get a text back or, get a text from somebody else that he's no longer with us. So, and then my other buddy, his wife had a stroke, and they're young, they're early 30s. And she's the backbone of their household, bottom line. That dude can't function without his wife. And he acts like a big kid, like most of us men do. He's a big child. And I've been reaching out to him, making sure he's okay, making sure his wife's okay, and how's she recovering. And I kind of forced him to go fishing with me the other day. He said he was gonna go, and last minute he was like, I can't, I gotta take care of something. And as soon as I put the boat on the water, I texted him and I said, hey dude, the boat ramp's dead, there's nobody out here. And he's like, all right, I'll come. And he showed up, and I drove back to the boat ramp and picked him up and just took him out fishing for the day. We didn't catch nothing, we just hung out. My son was with us, and we just hung out and fished. And I'm sure it was good for him just to get out a little bit and hang out with a buddy and get on the water and fish. I know he's got his hands full at home, helping his wife and taking care of her. And they got 2 daughters, he's had to really step it up. And I'll be honest with you, it seems like he's matured overnight. He seems super humbled, and you just never know how fast your life can change, how quickly, the things that you were used to every day, this guy, he has his wife make him a cup of chocolate milk every single night. Just ridiculous. I'm sure it was something his mom, they say we marry someone like our moms. And 100% this dude married somebody like his mom, someone that was going to take care of him, wait on him hand and foot, and make his chocolate milk for him every night, which is hilarious. But when that's taken away from you, it's those simple things that you just don't realize. You're just like, wow, like how much you appreciate those silly things, even though it seems so silly. And it puts a lot of things in perspective for us men, So if you got a buddy out there who's, going through it, whether it's a divorce, whether it's, losing a job, and I'm sure the men that are watching this know exactly what I'm talking about how much more weight we carry, even though it may seem like we're not at all. Every time you ask them, they say, I'm good, but they're not good. It's hard. How, just how much it does weigh on you, and how it's easy for men to put on a smiley face and just say everything's all right, but they're not good. And you don't need to be ashamed of reaching out to a friend that's going through it, or be ashamed of talking to a friend. Just, dude, I'm going through it right now, because most of us know. I had a big project here in the garage, for the last few years. It was a customer of mine / buddy of mine from back when I was building off-road trucks in California. And it was a truck that I had built, and we were adding to it and stuff. And he went through some wild stuff too. His daughter, his only child, had gotten into some trouble and was going through some court stuff. And his girlfriend, I think they were married, wife at the time, they ended up splitting over because a lot of it. And he was super stressed and going through it too. And, I was going through my personal stuff, and I just told him, I was like, hey man, like, you got a lot on your plate right now, both financially and mentally. He had some issues with a previous business partner that went south. So financially he was struggling, and I was just not in a good place to finish the project. And I was like, man, if I have to force myself to do this job one more day, I don't know where that would have put me, Like, I was at my wit's end with a career that I loved, and a career that I had spent so much of my life, 25 years, 20, plus years of my life building this career of what I thought I was going to do the rest of my life, only to realize that I'm just getting too old, and it's just not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And it was hard, it was really hard to swallow that pill and accept it, So definitely don't be ashamed to reach out to a buddy, even if they tell you you're being lame, dude. At least they're okay. I'd rather, like I said, get you're lame, dude, than he's no longer here. Definitely.